When it comes to technology ethics, people have different connotations. Some people think it is about AI ethics, or some people call it as ethical AI. Some people think it's all about responsible AI, and some people think that, okay, this is just about tech ethics. I think it's all the above, but it's more than that. To put it simply, it's about being considerate. Being considerate because as a technology contributor, as a developer, architect, project manager, chief technology officer, or anyone who is playing an important role as an individual contributor within the tech ecosystem, we have to be considerate because ultimately you have the power. I remember when I was a kid and we transferred from a small town, small village to a bigger town, and it was the first time I got to see cars and big vehicles, and I always marveled as to how those cars really work. Pestered my father asking as to how do they work really? How do people drive cars just with the steering wheel? And he said, no, it's not just the steering wheel, there are a number of other parts. He went on explaining me how the accelerator, brake and clutch, etc. work together. And I had this pesky little question: why do we need brakes? If we have accelerator doing its job, why do we need brakes? And his answer was quite profound. He said, brakes, the function is to slow down the car, but the purpose is to enable it to go faster. Brakes in the car do not slow it down. They enable the car. They allow the car to go faster. Ever imagine driving a car that doesn't have brakes? I bet you won't be able to drive it faster. Well, that's what is happening with technology. For past several years, there have been so many companies which have applied the motto of move fast and break things. And we have broken enough number of things on a social terms, on a political, democratic terms, on environmental terms, from different aspects. And I think just having the quality policy, just having the corporate governance policy is not going to be useful, not going to be helpful. We need more than that. And even more when it comes to API ecosystem, where every single day you see new APIs coming out, and every new API that comes out affects several other hundreds of APIs. It's truly contributing into exponential change. And that makes it all the more important that we have something more than just a policy. So what does it take to develop a great product anyway? How do you develop a great solution that is sustainable, that is more responsible, technologically ethical? And in my view, there are three key aspects that a solution has to cover. The first aspect is pretty fundamental. Every solution, every product needs to be designed with the right thing in mind. It must do the right thing. And I think that's not the main concern here, because most of the technologists do want to do the right thing. So really this is not an issue at the moment. The second key aspect here is doing it right. And fortunately there is enough information out there on the internet or in different conferences, and even in API conference yesterday and today. You have heard several other best practices and case studies where you got to know how to develop your product right in best possible way. So again, that part is covered. Now here's the third factor that is missing, and which most of the businesses miss, is covering all the risks. And those who try to do that, they always conflate business risk or financial risk with the unintended consequences. Here we don't just need to cover the financial or business risk or project risk, we also need to cover unintended consequences. All sorts of risks need to be covered. And when you cover all these three aspects of a good product design, you have got a 5-star product in your hand. This is a fantastic product that is designed right, that is well intentioned, and it covers all those risks. Now, when it comes to practicality of implementing these three aspects, I have seen a lot of focus on having a policy, governance policy and risk management policy. And I believe it's not just the policy we need a framework that is actionable by every single individual in your technical team. You see, when I used to work with banks for quite a long time, and every time there was a money laundering case, people held banks responsible. Although banks were not complicit in most of the cases, almost all the cases, they were never the part of that money laundering by intention. But the machinery that they build, the infrastructure that banks build, did contribute to those lapses and did enable money laundering to take place in first instance. And that is why people blamed banks for not having that framework, not having those controls in place. And I think with API ecosystem contributing to this exponential change, we have this responsibility as an ecosystem to establish actionable measures and enable all the technologists to deploy those measures in their day-to-day work. And that's where I think implementing these ethical measures, implementing these considerations into product design itself is all the more important, because you cannot go towards improvements, because it makes little to no sense to improve a product after it has gone out and it has caused certain damage. I mean, why wait for that time if you can fix something, anticipate something and fix it beforehand? And that's where implementing those ethical considerations beforehand is very important. And to do that, to enable that, one tool I highly recommend is pre-mortem analysis. Pre-mortem analysis is exact opposite of post-mortem. So if you have watched air crash investigation, you would know that in air crash investigation, usually there is an accident and then they go out finding out what happened, why it happened, what was the chain of sequence and what went wrong. And then there would be a recommendation as to what needs to be done in order to avoid it later. And sometimes it's too late. You don't have that time. I think if we apply pre-mortem, which is pretty sophisticated in terms of identifying issues well in advance and fixing them as many as possible, can enable you to implement technology in a very different, considerate manner. Now let's understand how the technology development usually progresses, especially in API and AI ecosystem. We have got 6 steps here. And we start right from design phase all the way to we train our systems, and we have a data collection, that are training data coming in. We deploy those systems, then we start using them, and then the feedback starts to come in, and that feedback goes into training, and we keep refining the system. And all those 6 stages, all these 6 elements of the product design, pre-mortem analysis can be applied in any of those points. In fact, all those points you should be considering to apply pre-mortem analysis. I remember a story from one of the Australian telcos which lost $11 million on account of not deploying technology right, not designing and deploying technology right. Had they used pre-mortem analysis, I'm pretty sure they would have saved all that money. Essentially what they did was they had this incident management robot which would intercept every incident reported. It would try and solve that incident, fix that incident all by itself online. And if it couldn't solve, then it would give it to the the human operator. But then there was this programming issue wherein it tried to maximize on sending people in the field rather than giving it to human operator. Plus, during the deployment phase, there were so many interactions with heterogeneous systems. So every single error, every single problem resulted into tenfold to the upstream suppliers as well as downstream consumers. And that just caused significant issues all over the place. And all of that could have been avoided if the pre-mortem was put in place. In pre-mortem, you ask three critical questions. The first question is, when you list down all the process steps, all the solution steps and features and functions, go by function by function. So let's say first function, you ask, what are the problems that could occur out of this function or a step? How bad that could be? What's the severity? If something goes wrong with this function, how bad would it be? Would it be lethal, hazardous, that is 10? Or would it be mere annoyance, that is 1? Similarly, you also go and ask questions regarding its occurrence as to how often this failure might occur. Will it occur every single time, that is 10? Or will it occur sparingly, that is 1? When it comes to detection, now detection has got a reverse scale. And the scale is reversed because higher the detection, you detect the problem early on and you can fix it early. So if something goes wrong, can you detect it? Can you detect it easily? And if the answer is yes, you get 1. But if you cannot detect it easily, and if it has to go through the whole cycle and the user has to report back, which means the damage is done, then the detection is low to none, and then the rating goes 10. All three ratings, S, O and D, multiplied together give you the risk score. They give you the risk priority number, and now you know which steps, which functions, which features in your solution are more critical than others, and now you can focus on them, and now you can apply some control, some measures, take some measures to fix those issues beforehand. You don't have to wait for something to go wrong, because now we have found it out. And doing this analysis, doing this pre-mortem itself will enable you to gain very high level of confidence in your solution that it's not only doing things right, it's not only doing the thing right, but it is also covering all the risks. And that's where your tech ethics quotient would be much higher. Now there might be a question that most of you might want to ask is, if I have to do all this, wouldn't it slow down? Wouldn't it slow down my development? Wouldn't it stifle the innovation? And we go back to the same maxim again. Brakes in the car do not slow it down. They enable it to go faster. Doing all this is not going to slow it down, but it will enable you. It will help you to go faster, to move faster, innovate faster, without failing into your solution, without having unintended consequences. You see, when I work with a lot of startups and entrepreneurs, I get a feel and a vibe, and I see a lot of people want to work with companies that have got some social connection, their ethical quotient is higher, and that's where I believe that every organization that have got high capacity, high ethical capacity will have competitive edge in coming future. And you could develop this competitive edge, you could develop and improve this ethical quotient if you develop technology right. And that is why I keep saying that it's on you to build that technology right. It's on you to build that sustainable product, sustainable future. So that 3 years down the line, 5 years down the line, if you look back and you have to look at what you developed, what you created, you should be proud of what you created. Because essentially technology always brings us two things. It brings us a promise of prosperity and growth, and it also brings us consequences, and mostly unintended consequences. And it is the consequences that we must be worried about, we must be careful about, because ultimately You are the individual contributor to this tech economy, and that is why you have to be considerate. So this is my message today, a two-word message, straightforward and simple. Be considerate, because ultimately you have the power.